I, like many people, did not expect to enjoy Marvel's Midnight Suns as much as I did, but seeing as I found the game absolutely awesome, I figured why not make content on it, starting by ranking each character in the game. We'll start with the Hunter, who is probably the hardest character to rank. Being a required character with the largest card pool kinda does that. While the Hunter has no real weakness, they also have a less defined design philosophy than other heroes do. Sure, there are some stinkers in their deck like Charge or Summon Charlie, but it's made up for with cards like Wrath or Annihilation. I'll probably have to make a second video on best Hunter builds, but for now, let's just call them an S tier character and move on. Up next, Iron Man. Iron Man's design philosophy seems to be, what if a character just killed everything themselves with no help from anyone else? To accomplish that, Iron Man gains extra redraws, and then expends them to power up his cards. His kit is really good. He's got a lot of different supportive cards that add redraws, allowing him to use his gimmick effectively. Then you have cards like Air Superiority that decimate the entire field. Mark Target is also an incredibly powerful card for Iron Man. It applies Mark, which means your card play is refunded upon killing the enemy, and Vulnerable, which means the enemy takes more damage. And you can apply that to multiple enemies for 2 turns. These are easily 2 of the strongest and most sought after effects in the game. His Quick Blast is also perfect for building heroic and taking down weak enemies. Having knockback if redrawn while also drawing an Iron Man card and dealing damage is basically everything you want in a quick card effect. Because of all that, Iron Man is a grade A character who fits on every team well. Doctor Strange is an interesting character. His gimmick is that he can empower cards when you reach a certain heroic level, making them more powerful. This would be cool if it didn't make them also cost more heroic, but most of the time I find the cost somewhat inhibiting. His quick attack is also kind of bad. It applies knockback without dealing any damage, meaning you have to knock an enemy into something or someone to get kills. And because it won't have damage that increases with a character's stats like other card abilities, it doesn't scale to late game encounters very well. However, Strange does make a powerful support ally when you're not using his attack cards. Blessings of the Shanty buffs damage to all cards in your hand permanently, and you can even stack it multiple times. These buffs do not go away if the card is played or discarded, meaning you can draw the card again and they will still be buffed. Shield of Seraphim lets you add a resist to all allies or 2 resist when enhanced, allowing them to not take damage from their last hit. Vapors of Valor allows you to conceal an ally of your choice, and if an enemy would attack a concealed ally, they just don't move at all. Great if you taunt everyone to a tank first. Overall, I give the character a solid B, maybe a B+. Captain Marvel, like Iron Man, is also trying to do the I'll do everything on my own thing. Unfortunately, her gimmick is a little less effective at it than Iron Man's. When Captain Marvel plays cards, generally about 3, she gets the Go Binary card. When she goes Binary, she gains block and increases the damage she deals to people. She loses Binary whenever she runs out of block. My main issue with Captain Marvel is that before she goes Binary, her damage output feels really low. It feels like she needs the damage boost from Binary to keep up with other characters, so it's less of a bonus and more of a requirement. She's best played as a tank, but she isn't the best at that either. Bring It On is her best tanking card, allowing her to taunt multiple enemies and gain counter, with the added bonus of getting 2 resist when in Binary. Photon Beam taunts everyone in a line, but that runs on the assumption that enemies are standing in a line and will usually cost you a valuable move to reposition. Her other taunts are all single target, which is something you don't really want in a taunt, although Knee Strike at least builds block. Quick Jab is a taunt, but it's also a quick attack, which doesn't really make sense to me. You're always only getting one of these effects out of it, meaning it's either a taunt that doesn't do anything else or a quick attack that doesn't do anything else. When it comes to building block, Regroup is your best bet, plus the block she gets when she first goes Binary, but she has trouble getting much more than that. Let's give a special shout out to Rain of Blows, a skill that depletes your entire heroic gauge on a single target attack, whose damage scales depending on how much heroic you have. That could be good if it didn't also remove all of your block, meaning you really only want to use this if there is one guy left on the map because you're losing Binary, losing your ability to tank, and losing your heroic. Far too much of a cost. Her main issue is that you want people attacking her so she can function as a tank, but if people attack her, she loses Binary, so it feels like there's a flaw in her design philosophy there. Overall, I'm giving her a D. She's usable, sure, but other characters do her things better. Next up, Nico Minoru. Her whole gimmick is that many of her cards have a roulette effect. Most of her abilities have some kind of random nature to them, which are determined when you draw the card. That being said, I absolutely still think she's one of the best characters in the game. Blood magic gives an ally counter, strengthened, or fast, which are all universally good enough that there aren't any bad options out of the roulette. Since you know what buff you're getting on card draw, you can still plan around which buff you're using. Blood for Blood is a pretty high damage attack that generates heroic and heals a random ally on KO. Since the random heal effect ignores allies at full health, it's pretty much always good, and the damage is high enough that you can pick up kills from a pretty high range. Curse applies Mark, Stun, Vulnerable, or Weak, all of which are pretty good, and again, you know what you get on card draw, so it's easy to plan around. Empower lets you draw a heroic card while making all heroics cost nothing, which is an extremely powerful support. Restore allows you to fully heal an ally, and if the ally had less than half health, you don't lose the card, letting Nico keep a copy of this in her hand and act as a healer, of which there are very few in the game. That's not to say there aren't stinkers in her deck. Swarm deals a random amount of damage, and sure, you know how much damage on draw, but unlike the more support cards, if you're not drawing a high damage roll, your card is much worse. Witchfire, Witchstorm, and Crack the Sky all target random enemies when cast, which makes them really not that good. But there are more than enough good cards in her deck to make up for a few stinkers. Nico gets to be an A tier. Blade is a character I really wanted to like, but I struggled to find a real use for. A lot of his deck focuses on the bleed effect, but he doesn't have a lot of ways to apply it. His passive, when fully upgraded, gives him a 25% chance of bleed on attack, which is way too low for how important it is for him. His main source of bleed is the Make 'em Bleed card, which causes the next 3 blade cards played to apply bleed. I am getting so tired of saying the word bleed. It's great, but when most of your cards feel like they rely on drawing this one card, it doesn't always work. A great example are his chain attacks, strike, and daywalker. Chaining bleed onto a foe would apply multiple levels of it, but half the time when I get chain attacks I don't have bleed up yet, which makes them kind of lackluster cards since they're missing secondary effects, especially strike. Then there are the cards that require bleed. Its quick attack does more damage to enemies if they have bleed, but most of the time you're not getting that, meaning that this is a quick attack that doesn't do much else. Reaper consumes all bleed on a target for damage, great if you can stack multiple levels of it, but overall just too conditional on getting Make 'em Bleed plus a chain first. The Hunger marks everyone who has bleed and restores Blade's health, but again, a little too conditional. But at least this one is free and doesn't cost a card play, so it's not bad. His legendary both applies bleed and does extra damage if a target has bleed. It's a versatile card addition to his repertoire, but it requires getting 5 friendship and you can only run 1 copy, which is why legendary cards in general aren't going to bring people up very much in my ranks. Then there's Relentless, which is cool, but doesn't really do much with the rest of his kit. Stake, which is cool, but doesn't really do much with the rest of his kit. And Savage, which is cool, but is conditional on an enemy having block and doesn't really do much for the rest of his kit. The only thing saving Blade is that he's the only character who can proc bleed, even if it is kind of unreliable. Bleed is great for forcing the tall, life-bonded Lilin into attacking their friends, as they always attack someone on the field who is bleeding. That puts Blade into C tier instead of D. Next, it's time for Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider has some really cool attacks, but way too many of them have too high a cost. His passive, Soul Meter, increases max HP when he gets kills and generates a copy of Strained Soul. Unfortunately, you're only allowed to increase your max HP twice before hitting the cap, and Drained Soul isn't that good of a card. Drained Soul increased the number of targets you can chain to per use, but also increased the heroism cost by 1. When other characters can chain more attacks for less heroism and without having to play the card multiple times, the drawback on this card feels too strong. And again, the increased chains have a cap stopping at 4. All of this with his passive and soul drain is supposed to help him function as a tank, but he doesn't do that very well. His real strong ability is Helmet, which allows him to create a drop with a higher than normal chance to instant kill. Drops allow you to instantly kill enemies by dropping them off the map, and this ability makes that more reliable and less map dependent. Ghost Rider has a lot of powerful knockback abilities, including Lash, which does forceful knockback in any direction and is a quick ability, meaning it refunds the card play on kill. And yes, the drop counts. Straight to Hell allows Ghost Rider to heal himself while replacing himself with a drop, which is great if you have other knockback abilities or want to take Ghost Rider off the field for the enemy turn. Overall, a solid C character. mostly due to the good parts of his kit like that quick knockback not being part of his default card set, and having too many cards like Hellride and Immolate that can be good but don't really synergize with his other skills. Next is the man with the plan, Captain freaking America. Cap is by far the best tank in the game. His passives give him a small amount of extra block each turn, letting himself top himself up a bit before getting into it. Dig in, builds block, taunts every enemy targeting another ally, and gives him counter. Shield Bound taunts everyone in an area and applies weak, making them do less damage to Cap. Tactician grants block to Cap and everyone else, and draws 2 cards, making it a great option to keep the team healthy when Cap can't quite taunt the whole field. The best defense is probably his worst block generating move, and it's still good, allowing him to build block for every single enemy he damages. Now for the bad. Shield Charge and Shield Bash both consume block, meaning they stop Cap from doing what he wants to do, and aren't usually very good. Sprang and Brooklyn Handshake are both okay cards that draw cards on KO, but lack a good synergy with the rest of his kit, keeping them from being amazing. Quick Punch another quick but also a taunt card, and just like Captain Marvel's, since you can't use both of these abilities at once, it suffers. Punch granting knockback and taunt is better, but it's still a single target taunt, which isn't that great most of the time. Cap has more than enough good cards to make up for a few stinkers though, and genuinely functions better as a tank than any other character. I'm debating of whether or not to put him in B+ or A, only because I feel like this game doesn't value tanks as much as damage dealers since the missions end pretty quickly. But on the occasional long boss fight, Cap is amazing. Let's swing on over to Spider-Man. Holy hell, did they make Spider-Man bonkers. He functions best when he can use environmental attacks to his advantage, with his passive giving him a small chance to refund the heroic cost. On top of that, he gets Opportunist, which increase the damage environmental attacks and makes them all free, while also increasing your move count so you can get into a position to use them easier. I'm sorry, this is clearly the best card in the entire game. The fact that it generates heroic instead of costing any is absolutely insane. His other support cards are equally broken. Spider Sense allows him to draw 2 Spider-Man cards, gaining 1 fast and 1 resist. Fast means every Spider-Man heroic costs 1 less, and resist ensures the next attack to hit him does no damage. Again, kind of a what the fuck card. Web Slinger grants Spider-Man Strengthened and is free, meaning it doesn't use a card use. Yep, just free bonus damage to all his attacks for a turn. There's no reason not to run this. Infernal Spider, when you get it, makes the next 3 Spider-Man cards free while drawing a card. Another absurdly powerful support, although you might not get it by the time you finish the game. To help his environmentalism further, Spider-Man gets Special Delivery and Web Throw, 2 amazing forceful knockback attacks that let you throw enemies basically wherever you want. Chain Attack is the absolute best for taking out low-level grunts or other weakened enemies. It's not as strong as other chains due to having to kill to continue this chain, but it's still pretty good. His Quick Attack is Quick Kick, which has the Doctor Strange knockback of not dealing damage, but at least he gets damage when the opponent has already taken damage that turn, making it slightly better. His worst card is Thwip. Bind just isn't that good in this game, and I feel Firaxis kind of overtuned attacks with the bind effect. 2 heroic and a card play just to stop an enemy from moving next turn is okay. And the extra environmental damage is cool, but since most bosses aren't even bound for their full turn and only lose 1 action, and there are always way too many enemies on screen for binding one of them to be that good, and no binds last more than 1 turn, it just isn't that good of an effect. But don't let that take away from the fact that the Wall Crawler is going straight up into A tier as one of the best crowd control characters in the game. Magic is one of my favorite characters in the game, personality-wise. But unfortunately, that doesn't always make her good. She's really the only character in the game who suffers from her base kit feeling underpowered. Yes, everyone gets upgrades to their deck to get stronger, but Magic feels like you need new cards in order for her to function. Her whole shtick is using limbo portals to give players more manipulation over where enemies go on the map. Fortunately, damage from knocking enemies into each other, objects, and other allies just doesn't feel quite strong enough. The solution to this problem is Limbo's Grasp, a card that makes all enemies knocked through Magic's portal take extra damage for the rest of the mission, which I believe stacks with each use. So we have a similar situation to Blade, where her whole kit feels reliant on a specific card to be really good. But unlike Blade, this card is at least permanent, so once you get it, you're good to go. In order to send enemies through the portal, Magic only needs to use an attack that has knockback effect. This can be accomplished with a simple shove, or with cards like Quick Soul Slash, Soul Blast, and Kick. Kick is the only attack here that does additional damage. Quick Soul Slash is saved from being bad due to portals, which makes it easier to get a kill and activate the quick effect than Doctor Strange and Spider-Man's quicks. Soul Blast does forceful knockback and grant counter on KO, but again is fully dependent on the damage dealt in the portal or on the other side. My main issue with Magic is that plenty of characters get forceful knockback on damaging attacks, so why can't she? It makes her abilities feel underwhelming without a portal, and I just don't feel like you get portals quite as often as you'd like to. Outside of her portals, Ileana has the ability to move enemies with Trapdoor and Gather. These deal damage and are great for getting enemies in position for environmental attacks. But otherwise, moving enemies around is kind of a lackluster secondary effect. The last card we should talk about is Banish, which replaces an enemy or ally with a drop. Good, but without the bonus chance to insta-kill, I think Robbie's drops are just better. Then there's her legendary Darkchild, which grants her invulnerability, being the only skill to outright make you take no damage for a turn, taunts all enemies, and gives her counter. It doesn't synergize with anything she has, but it gives you a free turn where you don't have to worry about getting hit, which is always worth it in my book. However, the main problem with Magic is that too many enemies are immune to knockback, and can't be moved with Trapdoor or Gather. This makes it difficult to justify bringing Ileana to a variety of missions where she can only damage adds and can't interact with the objective. With that, and having a poor starting kit, I give Magic a D. I still use her a lot though, she's so damn fun. Wolverine is a character I really liked at first, but slowly weaned off of. His kit feels like it needs Berserk to function, a card just like Blades except it applies lifesteal instead of bleed. He needs lifesteal in order to tank well, as most of his abilities apply taunt. Chain Swipe, Eviscerate, and Quick Swipe are all used to apply taunt. Quick Swipe is another one of those taunt and quick cards, and it's just like the others, dumb. The other two skills allow you to taunt with a chain attack, which means you can choose to taunt multiple enemies or apply multiple levels of taunt to a single enemy to keep them engaged on Wolverine for more turns. Chain Swipe applies weak on full combo, meaning it weakens an enemy if Wolverine sends all his attacks into a single foe. Compare that to Cap's Throw, which weakens and taunts multiple enemies, and you can kind of see how Chain Swipes is underpowered. Eviscerate gives counter when any enemy is KO'd, which is much better, but costs heroic to use. Still, coupled with lifesteal, each of these attacks can be really powerful, you just have to draw lifesteal first. Wolverine's best taunt is actually a support, Stink of Fear, which taunts all enemies in an area, weakens them, and applies counter. Wolverine only has one other support card, Rapid Healing. This allows him to recover health and cure, and is even usable if Wolverine is unable to act due to daze, stun, or bind. Really strong ability that helps Wolverine stay alive without lifesteal. If Wolverine does die, he spawns in the Rapid Regeneration card. This card costs 2 heroic, but is otherwise free and brings Wolverine back from the dead. It also doesn't take up a spot in the deck, and just spawns the first time Wolverine goes down. Very strong. The rest of Wolverine's abilities feel kind of random. Lethal Pounce is a 2-chain attack that grants strengthen on full combo, which is cool I guess. Power Slash does forceful knockback and applies vulnerable, and since vulnerable is always good, this is awesome to run, but again doesn't really synergize with anything here. Piercing Slash is dependent on the enemy having block, and outside of that is kind of garbage. Midnight Special feels like it should have been a Nico card because it damages random enemies, and like Nico's card, it isn't that good because it damages random enemies. But the taunt and heal gameplay is cool, and with a healer to supplement his kind of lackluster self-healing, he functions as a pretty good tank. B tier. Scarlet Witch is a character who joins kind of late into the game, so for her to be good, she really has to make a splash and do what other characters can't. Wanda is advertised as a character with great AoE abilities, but somehow she doesn't have that many good ones. Her AoEs are Hex Field, Chaos Reigns, No More, Hexmark, and Chaos Field. No More and Hex Field both have the drawbacks of only damaging enemies near Wanda, meaning you both have to be positioned correctly using up a valuable move and have enemies all near each other. Chaos Reigns causes enemies to attack each other with a 50% chance of them attacking twice, which is a genuinely really good ability when you have some people clustered together. Chaos Field is a support AoE, healing everyone in the zone and giving them resist. Cool, but when people like Cap can give block to everyone no matter where they are, I wonder why Wanda needs to be limited to allies within her AoE zone. Hexmark applies Mark to all enemies in the zone for 3 turns, which is genuinely really powerful and second only to Tony's Mark also applying Vulnerable. To assist with her AoEs, Scarlet Witch gets Unleashed. This card increases the AoE zone by 40% for 2 turns. Honestly, this ability needs to last a little longer and bump up to 50%, but it's still pretty good. Outside of AoEs, Wanda gets Quick Toss, which does both damage and knockback in any direction while being quick, which is amazing. Probably one of the best quick cards in the game. Hex Bolt does damage and increases the chain amount each time you use it. The worst part of this ability is it starts at a chain of 1, which is just a single target attack. After that, it ramps up in damage, capping at a chain of 4, and doesn't cost more each time like Robbie's does. So she has some decent offenses and decent AoEs. Her main issues are her stats. While every other character has been training to get permanent stat boosts, Wanda joined too late to catch up on that front. This drops her from B to C tier, as other characters just have way more range on their own AoEs than Wanda and perform her job better. She just comes too late when everyone else is already established, and investing in her wouldn't be worth it unless her cards are way more powerful and less situational than they are. But in New Game Plus and Post Game, she's probably much stronger. Last but not least, we have the Hulk. This character joined so damn late, I don't even have footage of him that wouldn't be a spoiler, so sorry. He also doesn't have friendships or hangouts around the Abbey, and you can ask for access to apologize for that one. Hulk has a rage meter that grows when he is damaged and increases the damage he deals, but decreases whenever he attacks and lets off some steam. This allows him to double as both tank and damage dealer for the team, making him absolutely busted. His primary attack, Smash, applies stun, builds rage, and increases damage by 100 or so if the enemy's at full health, which is very broken. Gamma Kick deals forceful knockback, taunt, and weak, which is okay. It's a single target taunt that deals no damage, which isn't very good, but it could be way worse. Crush combos into Smash by dealing significant extra damage if the target is stunned and does not consume rage on KO. Broken. Challenging Roar is a single target taunt that also builds rage for each enemy currently targeting Hulk. This is great for building rage fast, but what he really needs for it to be good is a taunt that hits multiple enemies. Oh yeah, like Rampage. It refunds heroism for a full combo, but realistically you want this to go into multiple people. Seismic Slam also damages and taunts all enemies in an area and has a built-in increased area of effect. Then, if Hulk's taken some hits and his health is getting real low, he's also built Rage, which means he can use Always Angry to consume all rage and heal himself. If he overheals, he increases max HP, and he also gets 1 rage back just to help him start back up again. If this ability wasn't an exhaust, Hulk would be unstoppable. You get the picture of him by now. The rest of his abilities all stun and deal damage to make sure no one can so much as get up to attack him. This character is busted. The thing is though, this is a new game tier list, not a New Game Plus tier list, and Hulk joins even later than Wanda, who lost points for joining late. By the time he joins, your other characters should be busted too, with crazy stats and ability mods and whatnot. So I'm just gonna give him a C. There's nothing wrong with the character, you just don't have time to really invest in him. And that brings us to the end of the video. That was a lot. But hey, thanks for watching and subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna go rest my throat.